Good evening. As well as the sad scenes at St James Park, we've got the real football action. 2 goals take Sunderland to Wembley in another pulsating playoff.
Newcastle United fans last night wrote another shameful chapter in the never-ending story of football hooliganism. Now the whole English game waits to count the real cost. The police have reacted swiftly. Bring back the fences, urges Northumbria Chief Constable Sir Stanley Bailey. But a Tyneside MP insists caging in the fans is not the answer. He calls for an all-seater stadium. Newcastle chairman Gordon McKeeve talks of the club's night of shame as United's First Division dream collapses. But Newcastle could be condemned to more than another season in the Second Division. With English football on trial, the club must wait for an FA backlash. Roger Thames was at the match.
Perhaps the biggest condemnation of last night's disgraceful scenes is that many people weren't even surprised when the fans invaded. The prize of First Division football was so great it had ruthlessly exposed every worst aspect of one of football's fiercest rivalries. Even before the kick-off, the atmosphere was right on that dangerous borderline between passion and hatred. Once Sunderland scored and Newcastle were chasing their football destiny, many genuine fans must have feared the worst.
With just a few minutes left on the clock, United fans still hoped their side could draw level and take the game into extra time. But when Gabbiadini and Gates combined well on the edge of the area to set up Sunderland's second goal, it was like watching a powder keg explode. They poured onto the pitch from the notorious corner of the Gallagher end. Their intention was clear. They wanted to stop the game and get the match abandoned. They succeeded in their first mission, with referee George Courtney being forced to take the players off the pitch. But hundreds of police officers then put their contingency plans into operation. They had to play a waiting game, but there was never any question of abandoning this semi-final. Similarly, there was never any question of the United fans trying to reach the Roker supporters. The excellent police work would have prevented it in any case, but they were content to cause mayhem in one section of the ground. Time and time again they surged onto the pitch, but they were met by police and stewards, and they knew they were fighting a losing battle. There were several casualties, including 9 policemen. One is still in hospital with lacerations to his eyeball. 58 United fans were arrested and 17 more were thrown out of the ground, but Mr. Courtney managed to restart the match after an 18-minute delay, and then they played out the last few seconds. He couldn't stop the invasion, but he made sure justice was done. When that final whistle went, there was only one hiding place: down the tunnel.
Last night's incident would have been impossible 13 months ago when St James's Park was surrounded by fencing. But after the Hillsborough disaster, the City Council, against the wishes of the club and police, ordered the fences to be pulled down. That left the pitch open to another invasion. Now the police are to send an urgent request to the council asking for the fences to be reinstated.
If fences had been there last night, stewards would have been on the gates. If there'd been any sign of crushing, then that sort of plan would have been put into operation. What it would have prevented would have prevented the mass of spectators getting onto the pitch. There's no way that any line of policemen can prevent that happening simply by standing along the track. You need something to deter the spectators in the first place, and in our view would have done that.
The City Council say they will continue their policy of monitoring both crowd control and crowd safety. They thought last night presented a crowd control problem, which the police dealt with perfectly. But until they receive the Chief Constable's letter, they cannot comment on the re-erection of fences. But local MP Doug Henderson, who was at the match, firmly believes they will not solve the problem.
I'd be very opposed to that. I think the evidence that was submitted to the Taylor report quite clearly confirmed that fences are very dangerous if there's a crush, and I think that must be rejected. We have to look at other means. The long-term aim must be to get rid of the hooligans out of the grounds and away from football. But I'm not naive enough to believe that that can be done overnight. And we've got to take firm action in the short term to protect not only the game and the name of the game, but to protect the name of Newcastle in our case. And we've got to rebuild an image to show the rest of the country and indeed the rest of the world that Newcastle is a decent place to live and work. We've got to continue to attract industry to our area, and I believe that if we can't show that we can behave ourselves at football grounds, then it won't help us to do that.
After the match, the hooligans vented their spite on the centre of Newcastle. Windows in shops, building societies and banks were smashed by gangs of vandals. One of the worst hit areas was the Haymarket, where 4 windows were broken in one street alone. Police reported that several cars had also been damaged as the gangs rampaged through the town trying to attack Sunderland supporters. However, the visitors were escorted safely out of town with no clashes reported.
While the majority of sane fans made for the safety of home to either commiserate or celebrate, the players and management of both clubs were left to deal with their own conflicting emotions. The crowd trouble had cast a black and white shadow over Sunderland's moment of triumph. For Newcastle, the feelings were twice as bleak.
I feel very sad that a season that promised so much from a playing point of view, and a season during which the fans have behaved so well after the fences have been taken down, has finished on this note.
It's something that the game's got to sort out, and I don't have no answers. I mean, you looked at the people that ran on, and they were all about 12, 13 and 14, who were, you know, and okay, we understand the frustrations, but them kind of scenes should never happen at a football game.
Unfortunately, it was to be expected if the result went the way it was. That's the way of society at the moment. The government have got a big job on their hands to sort out the indiscipline within society. Football clubs are now paying out fortunes to try and keep them under control. The police did a marvellous job there at the end. They kept it under control superbly well, and it's a shame that they have to do it.
Did the scenes at the end involving the supporters take any of the gloss off for you?
Well, it did me.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's a shame that, obviously, I mean, that's the trouble with it up here. There's so much passion and involvement in it. It's just sad that it has to go like that. You know, our fans hopefully have behaved themselves. It's just, but I mean, it's not. I mean, I haven't seen exactly what's happened altogether, but hopefully it wasn't too bad. I think it was just a case of frustration, really.
One hoped that we would be able to get through the evening without trouble of any sort, and it's a grave disappointment to everybody that it proved not to be so.
The timing of last night's trouble could not have been worse. True, it never reached the savage depths of Leeds fans' thuggery at Bournemouth, but with English football's European future awaiting judgment, it was another disastrous prelude to what might happen in the World Cup. The much criticised Minister for Sport, Colin Moynihan, refused to comment till he'd seen official reports. But one of his spokesmen can only limply describe the fans' invasion as rather regrettable. One of Mr Moynihan's more senior colleagues was in the region today. Environment Minister Chris Patten gave us this reaction.
Well, I think everybody must have been extremely saddened by what happened on the pitch. And obviously all our sympathies go out to those police officers who were hurt, particularly the police officer who got badly hurt in the eye. I very much hope that they make a full and rapid recovery.
What effect will this have on attempts to re-enter the European football scene?
Well, every development like this, every outbreak of violence obviously has an effect, but I'm sure that every decent football fan in this region, every decent Newcastle supporter, and that is the overwhelming majority, will condemn unreservedly what happened last night and will think that those who invaded the pitch were downright fools.
So what now awaits Newcastle United as they rebuild for another 9-month promotion campaign? Of course, this isn't the first pitch invasion at St James Park. 16 years ago, fans broke out of the old Lees' End and stopped play just after Nottingham Forest had taken a 3-1 lead in an FA Cup quarter-final. Newcastle went on to win 4-3 when play resumed, but the result was declared void and the game replayed. It was perhaps this legend of disgrace that inspired a new generation of hooligans. On that occasion, United were made to play next season's home cup ties on their opponent's ground. The FA won't act until they receive reports from referee George Courtney and the police. But what might they do? Make Newcastle play on a neutral ground? Shut down the Gallagher end? Perhaps insist games continue behind closed doors? With UEFA watching, Newcastle must pay the price of what the continent calls the English disease. Of course, what the mindless minority simply couldn't stomach was that Sunderland outplayed Newcastle fair and square. There was no mayhem from the players like last Sunday. Sunderland's disciplined teamwork won the day. But what a different story we might be telling, if only.
Stimpson. He just got that clear. Christensen showing good control in the difficult area of the field. And good play from the right. Both McGee and Quinn in the middle. He picks out McGee. Oh, he hit the post. Mark McGee nearly drew first blood for Newcastle United. It's a Sunderland throw. Kay will take it. Down the line for Gabbiadini. Well, that's a good ball for Hours. Hours has done well. Gates! Yes! Sunderland have gone in front. Eric Gates, the scorer. And the most experienced man on the field, Eric Gates, the former Ipswich Town and England international, has given Sunderland a dream start. Brilliant play by Hours, but look at the sharpness of Gates in the penalty area. Good finishing. Aitken nearly got there. Confusion, and in the end it comes to McGee. And how is that kept out? Anderson clear. Cork is there again. Gabbiadini turns it on and gets it back from Gates. And in it goes towards Hours on the far post, and it reaches him. Oh, blocked brilliantly in the end by Stimpson. Sunderland beginning to look a bit stronger in these final minutes. Gabbiadini again. Gates. Gabbiadini gets it back. Yes! That's the goal that will send Sunderland into the final playoff at Wembley. With 5 minutes to go, Marco Gabbiadini, their leading scorer, slides in Sunderland's second, and there can be no hope for Newcastle now.
So Sunderland face Swindon Town at Wembley on Bank Holiday Monday. Dennis Smith and his players have the region's First Division future at their feet.
More than 50 supporters were arrested and 7 police officers injured. And it's led to calls for perimeter fencing to be reinstalled.
With English football very much on trial as it tries to return to European competition, the scenes at St James's last night were the very last thing anybody wanted to see. Trouble flared 5 minutes from the end when Sunderland made it 2-0, putting the game beyond Newcastle's reach. In what appeared to be a well-orchestrated move rather than a spontaneous reaction, hundreds of fans spilled onto the pitch, determined to stop the match, something they succeeded in doing for 20 minutes. Afterwards, with the ground cleared, a broken goalpost remained as a solitary reminder of a shameful end to the season. There was a touch of irony, too, in the message flashed on the electronic scoreboard.
The scenes brought shame upon the Newcastle United supporters, or that minority of Newcastle supporters who spilled onto the pitch when Sunderland scored their second goal. There was no excuse for that. Quite apart from anything else, it was an example of bad sportsmanship.
More than 500 police officers had been on duty. They'd expected trouble in the event of a Newcastle defeat.
It's been a very sad night. Newcastle fans, the majority of which are very good and decent people, but the hooligan element tonight excelled themselves and brought out the worst possible face of Newcastle United football supporters.
The disturbances have inevitably led to calls for a return to perimeter fencing at the ground, which was taken down last season following the tragedy at Hillsborough. The police and the club had always expressed concern at that dismantling.
After Hillsborough, the local authority determined or decided that the fences should come down, and they had to come down within that week, otherwise we wouldn't have been allowed to play on the following Saturday. Until now, the fans have respected the greater freedom that the absence of fences gives them, and it's a great shame that today they should have abused that privilege.
You know, Sunderland, Newcastle, there was always a very good chance of a problem, and unfortunately we caused that problem.
So unfortunate with crowds back in the headlines, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all happened over the last couple of weeks in promotion and playoffs, and it's very sad. But, you know, it's very sad that, you know, we did think that the crowds were beginning to behave themselves, but obviously that's not the case.
As Sunderland's well-behaved supporters celebrated last night, Newcastle were left to reflect on the possibility that the hooligan element amongst their fans may well have contributed to further isolation in Europe of English football.